Everyone knows pirates were criminals. Nassau proved they were something far more dangerous: economists. The accepted story is simple. Golden Age pirates Blackbeard and Barney Henry Morgan were outlaws. They raided ships, buried treasure, and died on gallows. History books treat them as footnotes to colonialism. But between 1690 and 1730, Nassau transformed from a Spanish ruin into the wealthiest port per capita in the Atlantic world. That didn't happen through plunder. It happened through trade. Start with the geography. Nassau sits on New Providence Island in the Bahamas, roughly 400 miles east of the Carolina colonies and 600 miles northwest of Hispaniola. In the 1680s, it was abandoned. The Spanish had sacked it decades earlier. What remained was a natural harbor, deep and sheltered, with multiple escape routes to open ocean. It was, accidentally, the ideal port for people whom no legitimate port would accept. By 1700, roughly 500 pirates made Nassau their base. By 1710, that number had grown to around 1,000. They didn't arrive because they wanted to colonize. They arrived because the Atlantic trade routes had become more valuable and more dangerous than ever before. Spanish silver from the Americas was flowing to Europe. English merchant vessels carried goods worth thousands of pounds. The rewards for interdiction were staggering. Here's where the standard narrative collapses. Most seized cargo never left Nassau. It didn't get buried or hoarded. It got sold. Immediately, colonial merchants from Boston, New York, and Providence sailed to Nassau knowing exactly what they'd find. They came with currency, credit, and blank invoices. They bought plundered goods at 20 to 40% below market rate, then sailed home to resell them at full price. Nassau became a discount market. The economics were brutal but coherent. A pirate crew that seized a merchant vessel worth £5,000 faced a problem: how to convert stolen goods into liquidity. They couldn't walk into London, so they sold to a Boston merchant for £3,000. The Boston merchant resold it for £5,000 in New York. Everyone profited. The system had no moral center. But it had perfect market logic. By 1715, Nassau had become something unprecedented. A free port, not free in the sense of liberty, free in the economic sense. There were no tariffs, there were no import taxes, there were no colonial governors controlling what could be bought or sold. For merchants tired of London's regulations and Boston's trade restrictions, Nassau offered something radical: unregulated commerce. The pirate government, yes, there was a government, understood this. Around 1718, pirate captains established codes and elected leaders. They created rules governing how plunder was divided, how disputes were settled, and who had authority over the port. It was democracy by necessity, not ideology. A captain couldn't rule alone. He needed consent from his crew. Crews wouldn't work for someone who seemed likely to cheat them. This matters because it shaped incentives. If you're a merchant in Boston and you want to buy contraband, you need assurance that the seller can actually deliver goods and that the deal won't collapse into violence. The pirate codes provided that assurance. They were functionally contract law. Imperfect and brutal, yes, but enforceable. By 1720, Nassau's population had swollen to nearly 2,000 people. That included not just pirates but provisioners, shipwrights, tavern keepers, and merchants. A ship could be careened, pulled ashore, and repaired in Nassau faster than anywhere else in the Atlantic. A damaged hull could be fixed. Supplies could be bought. Crews could be hired. The port had become economically essential to a specific kind of commerce. The real economic engine, though, wasn't piracy. It was privateering's shadow. The War of Spanish Succession ended in 1713. Thousands of privateers, legally sanctioned raiders, suddenly lost their letters of marque. They couldn't raid anymore without becoming felons. Many came to Nassau. The distinction between privateer and pirate blurred, but the economic function remained identical. They were merchants of seized goods. Nassau's economy wasn't based on violence. It was based on information asymmetry and regulatory arbitrage. Boston merchants knew goods were cheaper in Nassau. London merchants didn't. Colonial governors couldn't control Nassau. London could control Boston. That gap between what was legal where and what was profitable elsewhere was the entire business model. The currency in Nassau tells this story perfectly. There was no single currency. Spanish silver dollars circulated alongside English pounds, French louis d'or, and Dutch guilders. Merchants exchanged at market rates. The port was truly international because it had to be. You couldn't exclude foreign ships, they were your customers. You couldn't demand payment in one currency, they didn't have it. By 1725, the system was collapsing, not because it was immoral, because it was too visible. London and Boston merchants had grown wealthy from Nassau trade, but they'd also become politically powerful. They lobbied their governments. Colonial governors were ordered to suppress piracy. The Royal Navy deployed ships to patrol the Caribbean. One by one, pirate strongholds fell. Woodes Rogers arrived as governor in 1718 with a simple mandate: end piracy. He offered pardons to those who surrendered. Most refused. He hanged those he captured. By 1730, the last major pirate havens were gone. Nassau was rebuilt as a legitimate colonial port. the unregulated free market became a regulated colony. Here's what history usually misses. The merchants who profited most didn't disappear, they became legitimate traders. The networks that formed in Nassau persisted. The lesson they'd learned that regulatory gaps create profit didn't vanish, it got institutionalized. Free ports became a deliberate policy. Singapore, Hong Kong, and Mauritius later copied the Nassau model explicitly. No tariffs, unregulated commerce, merchant-friendly rules. The Pirate Republic of Nassau lasted roughly 40 years. In that time, it demonstrated something fundamental. Commerce doesn't require morality. It requires trust, rules, and a reliable way to convert stolen goods into legal currency. Pirates didn't invent that system, but they proved how powerful it could be when no authority could regulate it. The wealth created in Nassau was real. It funded merchants, built ships, and enriched ports across the Atlantic. It also depended entirely on a legal fiction, the pretense that these goods had been legitimately obtained. Once that pretense became untenable, the system collapsed. The merchants survived, the pirates didn't. But the principle that wealth flows to wherever rules are most favorable persisted. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe to see how financial systems that seem permanent are often just accidents of geography and timing. There's a new one every week. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.